Howdy again everyone, and today I'll be retesting a very popular old Canon lens all the way from 1992 on a modern camera, the Canon EF 85mm f1.8 USM. Astonishingly, despite its design being 31 years old now, Canon are still selling new copies of this lens for a price of about $500 or a little under £500 here in the UK. You can easily find a good copy of this lens on eBay for about half of that price though. People might still be interested in this lens if they're still using a Canon digital SLR camera rather than mirrorless, or if they want to adapt it onto an RF or EOS M mount camera to have an official Canon portrait lens in their kit bag at a relatively affordable price. This is one of my wife's favourite lenses, as this is the exact copy which was her first ever portrait lens that she owned. She used to use it on an old Canon 50D before she and I ever met, and now I'm going to torture the poor thing on my Canon EOS R5 and R7 stress tests. Back in 1992, a 45 megapixel digital camera was pretty unimaginable, but this lens has a good reputation for sharpness, so I can't wait to see what it can do. As you can see here, the lens has a small, handy size, weighing 425 grams or about a pound, and has very typical build quality for a mid-range Canon lens of its era, made of plastic but feeling nice and solid with tactile surfaces. It's based on a metal lens mount without any visible weather sealing, and you also get a raised auto manual focus switch. Then comes the rubberized focus ring, which turns fairly smoothly, about 100 degrees or so. It is mechanically connected to the USM focus motor, but on a clutch system, which means that you can turn that focus ring at any time. The autofocus, as you'd imagine, is lovely and fast, emitting only a very quiet whooshing sound as it goes. On my old digital SLR cameras, I remember it wasn't amazingly accurate when shooting through the viewfinder. However, when shooting on a modern mirrorless camera with an adapter, their contrast-based systems ensure good accuracy all the time, and you can get subject and eye detection autofocus as well there. Here you can see that the lens struggles with fairly heavy focus breathing. It's surprisingly strong here actually. The lens's filter thread is 58mm wide, and a plastic lens hood is available which clips onto the front and annoyingly spins around. The lens does not feature image stabilization. Overall, classic Canon build quality from 30 years ago here, and it's really pleasing to see this thing still working absolutely fine, quite perfectly really, adapted onto a mirrorless camera. Okay, time to take a look at image quality. Let's see what 1992 can do. Firstly, adapted on to a Canon EOS R5 with its full frame 45 megapixel sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At f1.8, we are seeing decent sharpness in the middle, but slightly low contrast and, more obviously, very strong purple fringing, which can be pretty difficult to clean up in editing. Over in the corners, the good news is that sharpness is keeping up, but purple fringing is still visible, as well as a little ghosting on contrasting edges. But I have some good news for you. Stop down to f2.8 for sharpness and contrast to become excellent in the corners of the image without colour fringing, and back in the middle, that purple fringing is also gone and the sharpness is looking pretty good. Stop down to f4 and sharpness and contrast become perfect from the middle to the edges. Stop down as far as f11 and softness creeps in due to diffraction, and f16 is looking noticeably soft. Still, a very nice performance on full frame here. It's only really at f1.8 where the lens starts to show its age, but more with problems concerning colour fringing and slightly low contrast. So let's really torture this thing by adapting it onto my Canon EOS R7 with its 32.5 megapixel aps-c sized sensor, one of the most demanding out there today. Impressively, at f1.8 and in the middle, sharpness is still quite good. Unsurprisingly though, purple fringing is magnified by the more demanding sensor and is getting a little out of control. Corner image quality is noticeably softer now, but still holding itself together just about. Stop down to f2.8 and the purple fringing is almost gone, but the image isn't really any sharper. Back in the middle though, picture quality is looking great now. Stop down to f4 and that's about as sharp as you can get on this sensor, and back in the corners we see an improvement also. f5.6 and f8 look just about perfect in the corners, and as you'd expect, f11 and f16 get much softer due to diffraction. So it's clear the R7 is a tougher playing field, and the lens is really showing its age at brighter apertures. It's still usable at f1.8, but you'll want to keep it away from high contrast subjects, or at least shoot them in black and white if you don't want them to be bathed in radioactive purple. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. The good news is that the optic projects almost no distortion at all. The bad news is that vignetting at f1.8 is unsurprisingly high. It's topped down to f2.8 though, and it's almost completely gone, so that's not a bad performance. The lens can focus down to 85 centimeters, which is pretty much dead average for an 85mm optic. At this close distance, the image is a little softer, and you're also treated to all of the purple at this setting. Stop down to f2.8 and that colour fringing is gone. Stop down to f4 and sharpness and contrast become excellent again. Let's see how well this lens copes against bright light. When I get into your picture, there's a fair bit of glaring to be seen here, as well as some broad, but not too opaque, flaring. Next, bokeh. This lens's bokeh generally looks quite soft, although specular highlights get a bit of a nasty green outline, particularly if you're shooting on an aps-c camera. And, well, that's probably because of longitudinal chromatic aberration. Here you can see that, typically for a lens of this era, colour fringing on bokeh highlights is disturbingly strong. It's still there at f2.8, but at f4 and f5.6 it's virtually gone. Overall, this is definitely an 85mm lens of its era, and by that I mean it's sharp, but you'll have to put up with quite a few colour fringing issues that modern lenses mostly manage to sidestep. It can be annoying, but it's still quite an effective lens for portrait and subject photography. Blah blah blah, thanks for watching, blah 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 camera lenses, blah 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 Patreon, and thank you to my Patreon supporters for keeping this channel going. Check it out below for exclusive bonus content, and ciao for now.